Today's presenter, Russell Jackman, is a graduate of the McGeorge School of Law, University of Pacific, and was admitted to the State Bar of California in June of 1994. He has been vice chair of the California State Bar's Law Practice Management and Technology Committee and a member since 1996. He works specifically with law offices and attorneys that need to get the most out of their legal technology and creates PowerPoint presentations for opening statements, direct examinations, and closing statements to be used in court, and can work with attorneys directly to filter their documents and images so that they have the most powerful visual presentations possible. He also works with law offices and solo attorneys to upgrade their older systems to new ones, troubleshooting existing setups, and training attorneys and staff on Microsoft programs. He is available for remote access consulting on technology-related issues, so please feel free to contact him at any time.
Hello. Thank you for being here for this presentation. Today's presentation is Attorneys in the Cloud, Heads In or Heads Up. I'm Russell Jackman, and I've been doing a number of presentations for the Center for Continuing Education as a technology consultant, as an MCLE lecturer provider with the Center of Continuing Education. We have other courses such as the PowerPoint for litigators, computer security for the law office, bring your own technology to work. And I myself can be hired out as an independent consultant if you need the technology assistance. So let's talk a lot about the cloud today, because I think in current times that we are in, the concept of how the cloud works and how it is affected by the different levels of your computer systems and how your data and information, which is really the central part of how you do business, is going to manage in the future. And so understanding how the cloud works is pretty important. Now, who runs it? That's probably the biggest question of all, right? And it really does depend on not just the internet itself working, but the fact that everybody is sort of connecting and sharing their information and not having to be able to shoulder all the information all at once, one location at one time. I think that's one of the things that has been a big transformation of data in our lifetime. Probably the biggest thing of all, which is that it used to be that you had to go to the office because that is where your information was. It's stored, first of all, in filing cabinets and on pieces of paper, and there were typewriters, Xerox machines, and things that you didn't have at home, or if you had at home, would have, been awkward and wouldn't have been able to really compete on a professional level with the way a law office was able to do business, or any business was able to do business. But we've seen now, especially in the times that we're in currently, that the decentralization of where that information is, the fact that everybody has access to some kind of system where, at least to a rudimentary level, they can continue to work and be effective and do things, manipulate data, access data, use programs to create professional level items without having to worry about a compromise in how it looks professionally. So, in other words, you are accessing something on a laptop at home is the same thing as if you're standing at your machine in your office. There's probably a lot of people have more powerful machines at home than they do at the office, when like the office has much older, items available at, they haven't upgraded in 5, 6 years because of politics and because of budget. But at home, you have something that's much better and works much more effectively. So the decentralization of data so that you don't have to check in to one place at one time has become a big difference in what is cloud. And where is it? It doesn't matter as much anymore where your physical data actually is. It's when it's in the cloud, you have access to it wherever you need it to be. And that the cloud itself, every server farm that exists pretty much has significant backups available in the sense that they have it in case they really need it because they know that's what their existence, thrives upon. So they shoulder the burden of it, say like a Google or a Microsoft or Iron Mountain or whatever server or service you happen to be using to store your data on, Carbonite, those sort of different companies. That's what their reputation rests on. And as an attorney, you are only being held to the standard or are held to the standard of doing what is within reasonableness to protect your data. And considering how the rest of the world is using cloud computing to manage their data, especially in the days of GDPR compliance, working with the cloud is not as big a risk, and the security is much better than probably the security that you have at your own law office. Will it go away? It doesn't look like it is. It looks like this is where the future is as far as a sustainable model for managing information collectively. People want to have access to lots of things, and they want to be able to work on it no longer stuck at the office. We're, again, seeing a time in our lives, 2020, where going to the office is actually not physically possible. But there were times a few years ago in California where the wildlife fires were keeping people from going to work. There were other situations where, floods and other natural disasters happen, or there could be theft or other situations where, a physical office is not capable of being used any longer or for, a certain amount of time, thanks to those physical situations that can happen by having all your information just in one location, say at an office server. So knowing that you have a company, at least ones that you've thoroughly researched well enough that you could trust, and ones that you know that other attorneys are trusting, where that information is going to be there. I mean, for the bigger companies, there are certainly situations where any data can get lost. Nothing is foolproof or perfect, but for the absolute vast majority of attorneys that are, for data that's out there, considering all the businesses that rely upon it, it's pretty easy to do your due diligence and find out what a smart idea is for the company to use for clouding information. Is it worth using? I think that's one of the things that attorneys go through a lot. Is they're worried about whether or not it will be useful, whether or not it's something that will make sense. But it actually is, and we'll discuss why that is. There are a lot of different reasons. Some of them not only are based in the law office itself, but as we talk about as client-facing and things that the clients can use, portals and sharing information with them and keeping in touch with them so that they feel like they're still in the loop. So there was an American Bar Association survey that was done recently, and the numbers were actually, even to me, and I'm a pretty big skeptic when it comes to law offices and computer use. This is only a couple years ago. I know it's gone up somewhat, but it'd have a long way to go. In other words, 58%. So nearly a third of the, or maybe a little over a third of law offices are not using any kind of cloud service. So it's those numbers are pretty bad. And they also said that the don't know category decreased slightly to 11%. That means 1 out of 10 attorneys don't even know about how the cloud system could be of help to themselves or their client. And of course, they're showing that the lowest adoption was with the mid-sized firm with 50 to 99 lawyers, 44%. But even again, the solos and small firms that really depend on, in my opinion, the effective use of the cloud to make things happen are only about 60%. So good, 40%, almost, we're looking at almost half of the numbers of attorneys are just not using the cloud for any reason. And they're definitely in a compromised position currently and could be, should their physical data ever get compromised. So there are a lot of cloud benefits. And one of the primary ones that we're seeing now is the concept of file sharing and people being able to bypass the old-fashioned office server. Okay, so there used to be situations where you would have big-time, office servers that handled all of the firm's data, and their feelings, a lot of law offices feel like, well, it has to do with their desire to control their information and not be, have to worry about, it being stolen or compromised. But as I've talked about in a lot of other lectures, your law office being in charge of your own security is definitely doable, but it is a full-time job, and it's still important to have that anyway, given the fact that the data that you get from file sharing services, even if you're using the cloud for everything, you still have to have your own computer protected to make sure that it's not compromised and therefore giving access to people on what you keep in file sharing on your file share. But overall, you have to work with the idea that your own, trying to manage everything yourself, your own law office and your own law office server. I think money lost and creating a much more complicated problem. I've worked with a lot of companies that have abandoned their office, quote unquote, file server for using, say, OneDrive for Business, Dropbox, Google Drive, and so forth, instead of having to manage a file system where they have an expensive server in place, and then they have to maintain that server and the access to it and the security to it and the updating of it. Whereas you're working with Google, you're competing against how Google and these other, Microsoft and these other companies can all update themselves all at the same time. So file centralization, as I was talking about, is one of the key benefits. And certainly with items like Google Drive and OneDrive, you're working on the native files themselves, either online or in, the case of, say, like Dropbox or OneDrive, you're downloading the files and syncing them with the cloud, on a regular basis. So the files you work on one computer, that can be reflected on all computers or the ones that you wish them to be. And that, you know, again, can work on the phone, it can work on tablets. You're not chained to a particular software type necessarily, or even having to, like, say with a tablet or phone, those are less powerful machines. They can still do what a bigger and more powerful machine can do by tapping into the internet, working with those programs from a virtual server, or something again like Google Drive, where you can edit the documents online. Um, uh, these virtual machines I'm talking about are basically zero maintenance and always on. So you never have to go to the office, or you don't have to worry about what kind of access you need to, physical access you need to get to, because of course, not only, are some law offices, in buildings that themselves can be shut down, but then the office itself can be locked up, and locating keys and things like that are, thing that you don't necessarily want to deal with. But then also, by making something virtual, you don't have to go to the office. And so there's technically no commute. And people can work at home, and people can work, at whatever location is suitable to them. And the physical concept of having to go to an office, we're seeing now more than ever, a lot of people are able to do their jobs that used to be chained to a desk in the office. They can do stuff that they would normally be doing at an office at their home. And it's an adjustment, but technically they're able to do the same things they're able to do with their computers once they get logged in and all this stuff. And once everything is configured correctly, they are capable of replicating, for the most part, a lot of the work. So there are obviously ethical reasons behind going to the cloud, being able to use the cloud effectively. And one of them is the rule of competence. That is, you require the legal knowledge, skill, thoroughness, preparation reasonably necessary for the representation. This falls under that part of your rules of competence. Having the knowledge and skill, you need to understand the data on files and in filing cabinets, that working with documents that have the vulnerability of, say, being lost on a USB drive, or on somebody's, laptop or something, because you weren't able to find where that file came from. That's a part of your whole competency in what you're trying to do with your client. Your effectiveness and how you manage your data is central for working with clients and being able to get them to be provided with the information that they need, and the management of their information, to have the confidence in you and be able to be given the assurances that you're working with the highest level of computing knowledge, to again have what you're doing with your cloud system. As long as you know how it works, you know it's a dependable system, you've done the research, you're paying the bills on it. That's always a big issue, and you're making sure that you check in on the data to make sure that there's no kind of loss, and then maybe making a localized backup of it, once every on a regular basis, just at the local machines too, so that you have access. Say, let's say you couldn't get on the internet or something. So that's why something like OneDrive is a popular choice for a lot of companies, or Google Google Drive allows you to download individual documents too, or you can say have them available through some other means, you know. But what I'm usually a fan of having a hard backup on a localized hard drive, just in case the internet goes down, your most important documents, and then having an online version of it because, you know, I've had clients unfortunately have break-ins and have their computers physically stolen, or get physically destroyed in fires and other accidents. And so having both options available, not really that expensive, and it allows you to then make sure that you're adhering to ABA Model Rule 1.6, which is making a reasonable effort to prevent the inadvertent or unauthorized disclosure of access to information regarding the representation of the client. But all states that offer opinions on cloud computing say that it is allowed with reasonable care. So hopefully that gives, at least to a lot of attorneys that are reluctant to use the cloud, more assurance that they can actually find that cloud computing would be beneficial to them professionally. Now, California opinion 2010-179 says that you evaluate the nature of the technology, the available security precautions, and limitations on third-party access. Then you consult an expert if a lawyer's technology expertise is lacking. And then you weigh the sensitivity of the data, impact of the disclosure on the client, the urgency of the situation, the client's instruction. Of course, if a client says they don't want something to be electronically transferred or in the cloud, you do have to respect that. That is important. But a lot of it also has to deal with the management of your actual legal, you know, your system. And if you can usually explain to the client what systems are being put in place so that they understand what security is around and that it's safer than keeping everything in a filing cabinet locked away, which it probably is physically, and that it allows a more effective use of the client's data and information when processing their case, being able to, you know, work on it when they're not necessarily physically at the office, having more people work on it collaboratively, say with co-counsel or outside counsel, then hopefully a lot of clients will understand the importance of being able to work mostly on cloud system. So there are definitely cloud concerns, and that is security would probably be the number one reason that most attorneys have said that they have an issue with going to the cloud. And it's not an invalid security issue for security, but there are a number of ways that attorneys can manage their and beef up their security systems that they have available at the office. One of them there's also an issue of control that goes on with the concerns that attorneys have with they are giving up to another company the control of their information. So one of the things that attorneys are also afraid of is the loss of control of their data when they are putting something on the cloud, and that they feel that another company or another entity is truly going to manipulate their data or spy on it or on along those terms. Of course, you know, unfortunately or fortunately, Microsoft already has quite a bit of access to your data if you've ever read a end user release. And there's really no way to keep any of that stuff from absolutely perfectly being manipulated, except if you use end-to-end encryption, which you can use. You can go and encrypt one item or a set of items before you send it out to on the cloud and have it or sync with the cloud. So in other words, you create something locally on your system, put it into an encryption program so that it needs a password in order to open up. And if the person doesn't have the password, then that file is locked, and it then sends. You'd have to go through an unlocking procedure to be send emails and texts and so forth, a double layer of verification to be able to unlock that file. So if attorneys do have items that are incredibly sensitive, or things that a client has pointed out are too sensitive to just send straight through through email, then attorneys should find ways to offer encryption. There's a lot of encryption software that's out there available for attorneys to check out. Now, of course, one issue is pretty big, and that is what happens if you don't pay on time. Most cloud companies will give you a number of warnings, but then give you the opportunity to download your data. But if you miss that deadline and they pull the plug on your data, the end result is sometimes not all that pretty. So if you are going to make that concern, if you are going to make that move to switch over to cloud system, make sure that you pay to have your data kept up there, or that you're at least keeping a shadow copy of it on your own local system. So if you lose that data in the cloud, you still have a copy of it yourself. And you got to make sure if, in your contract, if you look at it, what the time frame is for when they will delete that data, and make sure you don't miss that deadline. Trusting your vendor is a huge issue, and we've seen, unfortunately, some companies over time, say like Yahoo, have definitely breached the confidence of a number of their users and didn't even tell the users that they had been compromised for about 18 months. And that was a huge issue that led to Europe. Was one of the leading factors that led Europe to create the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulations, which now are being adopted as California Privacy, the California Privacy Act, and Vermont has a Privacy Act, and we're going to see other privacy acts like Washington and other states being enacted relatively soon. And so that's going to be a big issue. You can start, they are now getting better at able to certify and show the kind of efficacy of the different computer security associations and server. You can now do a better job of detecting what level your computer security is at, doing things like pressure tests and finding out how reliable the security really is by running a number of different models, a number of different tests to determine how good your computer system is. And that has advanced a long way in the last few years. Now, definitely a major concern if you are going to go and cloud your information is the reliability of your internet connection and the speed of your internet, because very slow connections will mean that you cannot use, at least low bandwidth, and the inability to share that bandwidth can lead to a lot of unreliable connections with your server, and the inability to download and upload large amounts of data. So, I mean, I've worked with some clients that, are on old DSL lines and only getting maybe about 1 to 4 megabits per second of connection, which, well, at least in, in the 2020s that we're in, is really not effective to handle really large gigabyte files. And, some offices are even dealing with having to transfer, hundreds of gigabytes worth of information at a time. So the problem of having a 1.5 megabyte line transfer a gigabyte, takes forever. It's really slow. And that would be, with this client, that would be a maximum when they only have like a couple of people sharing it. Say like 10 people were trying to share this particular line, you were having a huge amount of slowdowns occur, and the people were unfortunately getting logged off, and their programs were crashing because they just couldn't. There was so little bandwidth to go around. So if you really have poor local bandwidth and you don't have good speed and you can't find that a way to improve it, then that could be a big barrier to adopting the cloud. So there definitely are concerns over cybersecurity, and that it's a little shocking to me in that ABA Tech report, they were saying that there were drops in the use of standard cybersecurity practices, and that that no more than 35% of respondents actually taking one of the specific standards of cautionary of cybersecurity measures. The 7% of respondents reported taking none of the security precautions of the types listed. I mean, 7 out of 100 attorneys. Thinking of how many thousands of attorneys that means in California, and I know that the ABA, is not a perfect cross section, but I think those numbers might even be more than, if you actually do this, an honest poll straight across the board. And that is really actually frightening that there's that large again, it's about that same number. We see that 30% number kind of pop up again and again when it comes to the technology ignorance. I'm sorry to say, but truly the technological head in the sand approach by a number of attorneys across the United States, not just California, but across the United States. And that is a very costly attitude for attorneys to have. And it's certainly not going to help them with their clients or in their own professional standing, especially that now that most malpractice insurance wants to know that you're going to be, at the very least, GDPR compliant, but mostly you're going to be looking at your state's Privacy Act when your state eventually has one. And they're going to ask you how you can adhere and what adherence you are to the Privacy Act. And that is, going to be taken very seriously. And right now, it seems like there's a good 30% of the attorneys out there that are not prepared to deal with that issue. And it's something clients can bring up. And if in a bad situation where you do get hacked, having to explain that to your clients and to your malpractice insurance is going to be a very costly thing indeed. And I'm really actually shocked this late in the game, there's so many attorneys that don't have much technological savvy when it comes to even taking any security precaution at all. 40% of the respondents report that the adoption of cloud computing resulted in changes to internal technology or security policy. And I'm not going to go into every single one of these security policy ideas because it's something I talk about in another lecture, but it's something to be aware of. Again, we're in that 30 to 40% range where they are saying that, there's a lot of attorneys put cyber, that will put cloud technology in place, but then don't make any sort of level or check on any level of security of what's going on. And they just throw it up and hope it sticks, throw it to the wall, see if it sticks, and then they move on. And that's not going to be sufficient if they're ever audited. So now there's a lot of good benefits for attorneys if they can get their act together and make their cloud situation work for them instead of being intimidated by it, being worried about it. If you can get, the right system in place for you, which is not impossible, and we're going to talk about other systems that exist and which ones you might want to try, as something to work with, for your office if you're currently not using something like this. But it does allow for centralized case management and document management. So again, what I was talking about before, when you have big time servers that you're at your office that handle all the files, the problem is when that machine has a problem, or it can't get on the internet, or it is down for whatever reason, there's a power outage, something along those lines, you have no access to that information. When you have stuff in the cloud, you have the ability to access it, at least in theory, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And someone at Microsoft or at Google or at fill in the blank company is there to manage it and to make sure that it's there for you whenever you need it. And so then having your documents being managed that way is also really much, it's sort of, instead of having a separate document management program running on your system, the way that, say, Google Docs or OneDrive works is that it keeps track of all the things that the document management program would do naturally, just by how it works. It tells you what version you have. It tells you what who made the last edits and when. Allows commenting. It allows tracking of changes and being able to produce that document without any metadata if you want. And so there's a lot of those things just because of the way that, say, OneDrive works, the way that Google Docs works, especially when you're working with the documents online themselves, not even waiting for it to sync up from one local machine to the internet. You're actually working at that quote unquote source of that document. And you'll always know which one is the current version, and you won't have a version flying around in email that, then you get two different versions of the same document. One person says, well, mine's the newest one. Another person says, mine's the newest one. And you just get into a big kerfuffle from there. So for time and billing there's hosted QuickBooks or Time Matters system. And that can be a lot better and a lot easier to access than trying to locally network it between workstations. So having time. So in other words, what you do is you get a virtual host system set up by, say, companies that we'll be talking about in a little bit. And you, instead of trying to go and have people now, like, say, use a VPN or a file, a thing like Go to My PC or Log Me In or something like that, you have that hosted on a virtual machine that you can have people log into simultaneously and work on that particular system, as opposed to trying to do it as sort of a poor man's dial-in VPN with Go to My PC or something along those lines. Then there's scheduling and reporting. becomes easier when you have it online and have people filling out forms and being able to talk about the hours and the matters that they work. Um, you can use it obviously as a contact management system, as a way to send mass emails to people and have that, work across entire firm. And then for conflict checking, obviously, there's a lot of popular uh, ways that you can use the cloud system to check for conflicts of interest. Um, so some of the cloud considerations you need to think about is like what law governs wherever, and you'll have to see in the contract, is it where you are or where the server is? So if there's a privacy act in your location, does your privacy act cover information, or is it where the server is located? Or it could be both. How would you be notified if there was a security concern? Will they text you? Will they email you? Will they call you? You own all the data uploaded, right? Got to make sure that they don't gain any particular rights over data other than the ability to maintain it and to make sure that you can have access to it. They need to have some access to it on the system, but that they will respect the privacy laws and make sure that the data is not manipulated in any way. And what's the vendor's reputation in the community overall? Again, at this stage, Google has been able to operate this well without having a major data breach, and Microsoft is one of the big kings of the castle, and Dropbox certainly has its users, and there's lots of Apple and iCloud have not been hacked. So there's companies that but then there's also smaller companies or companies of different sizes that people like for different reasons, and it's not professionally incompetent to sign up with any of those companies as long as that there's things like decent customer service, your ability to reach them in an emergency is important, and so forth, because you are entrusting clients' privileged data. I wouldn't just go with, somebody, who opened up a server, last week and they're doing it as a hobby kind of thing. That could be a little bit risky, but the larger ones and the ones that you've heard and have decent reputation are usually going to be at least reasonable enough to be considered an okay place to put your data. And then you can find out what sort of encryption is being used for your data. You usually are looking at a minimum of 128, but 256-bit SSL, you can get it, is going to give you a lot of security, and usually enough that most folks would consider that would be a worthwhile level of protection. And also, you want to, if you're going to be working with integrating your website with the cloud system, you definitely want to make sure that you're working now with HTTPS, which is the SSL protection for your website, and that your website management is being run to a level at which that it's not being hacked or being used to generate spam. A lot of, especially older websites, still have the HTTP on them for law firms, and because they don't have the security level set correctly, they can be used to harbor spam or to be used kind of as a spamming site for hackers. And it's really, you haven't updated your site in a while. It's probably a good thing to look into. Talk to whoever your web designer is, or if you made it yourself. Maybe look into getting an HTTPS listing instead of an HTTP. You do have a duty to supervise what's going on with your data. It's just not one of those set it and forget it type things. You do need to, see that everything is being synced, and that if you disable a machine, get rid of a machine, that all the data gets wiped off of not just the way to connect to the internet to get the data online, but that there are no local copies of that data that are still saved on that machine. And if so, if you're retiring the machine or the person leaves or something like that, you're able to get rid of that information. Or let's say they brought the technology from home and you allowed them to save that information locally, then, which would be a really bad idea, by the way. But if you did allow that to happen, you need to find a way to separate that. I did once have a client who unfortunately had a worker working from home with their own data, and this person had merged all of their personal files with all the data files that they got from the law office, which made pretty much all their own personal files discoverable for the most part, because they had no real system of separating out their personal files from the legal ones. They were all mixed together along with the emails themselves. They kept that all in their personal account too. So unfortunately, the client had to surrender all their personal emails and personal documents because there's no real separation going on. So, if that's going to be the case, you could be in for a big hassle. That's why it's kind of a duty to, when that information is set up and you're setting it up for people to access remotely, you need to keep track of it and make sure you know where it's going. And then this is all part of something that is sort of underutilized, which is the duty to communicate with the client. There's just a lot of law offices that don't look into the duty to communicate with their client seriously as they could. But by using the cloud effectively, you can certainly work with client and customer management systems, client, resource management, to be able to give clients regular updates on how their matter is progressing. You can share documents with them or have them send documents to you, and then know that that you're able to get it out to the different law office personnel so that they can manage their systems effectively. And so if the client knows that you're with it, with their information, that you're on top of handling it, that you are in control of their data, using that to make their case run more smoothly, the client is going to be impressed, and it will be a benefit to the communication that you have with. So, in fact, the 2019 survey unfortunately shows client focus is not a driving factor for lawyers considering the use of cloud computing. Consideration of client needs, expectations, and desires should be a key target area for innovative law firms and lawyers. But really, we look at the numbers again, and 17%, which is fortunate, down from 30%, sought advice from peers, and only 23% evaluated vendor company history despite stated importance of vendor reputation. 94% selecting vendors. So 94% say it's important, and then 23% actually do the work to figure out if vendors have a decent reputation. So I hate to say it, but many attorneys are talking the talk, not walking the walk. And it's worth the due diligence to make sure that something like that actually is taken care of. And it's kind of a little silly that they wouldn't do it. It's such a high number would say it's important and then not follow through it. So let's talk about managing some cloud risks. Well, of course, it does take internal due diligence, like I was talking about, to make sure that people are respecting the technology and respecting the data that's under their care, and that they have access to so much stuff that involves the fate of the law office and or your professional reputation. So it's important to do other things, such as making sure that people who are working for you that are working with this information sign suitable contracts and make written commitment they will manage your information appropriately. And then you just got to understand that the continuous access to data has its downside, in the sense that because there's continuous access to it, there's a continuous threat to it. There's no two ways about it. You can't, get rid of one without the other. If you want to have access to it, you want to be able to access it from around the world, means that other people could do it if they figure out a way in, or that your security isn't good enough to keep them out. So that's just something that has to be taken seriously. So security and security breaches will always be a present threat. What do you do about them? Just like you do things now to assure that your information, if you aren't keeping it in the cloud, that your key have locked doors, you have, maybe the most sensitive items, a safe or a safe deposit box at the bank, or it's kept off site, that sort of thing. So, they in the past, you had to take steps to make sure that your data was secured, and you have to do so now. And then you have to have a policy for what happens if you terminate someone that works for you. How do you deal with making sure that they no longer have access to the files, to the system, and are they fully, as we say, logged out in every form, including like on their phones, or if they were accessing their email from their phones, that sort of thing. They didn't download anything, and so to make sure that they use their personal technology to make that accountable as well. And then for implementation, of course, the really important thing is the training folks on the changes that are going on right now, if they're part of the system, but that you also have new hires sign up and explain to them what the requirements are and what the expectations are, and that you have documented instructions on retrieving and storing this data, so that it's not just saying, well, we have it in the cloud, that's great, but what happens when you need to get that data? If you don't actually know how to use your systems to retrieve the data itself, it could, and there was something that was a very important, time constraint. You could really put yourself over a barrel, fortunately, if you don't have that stuff already planned before an emergency occurs. So there's a lot. I've already mentioned a number of different cloud computing services, such as Dropbox and Box.net for business. They are, file repositories where, one of the big problems that has been a problem, it's been an issue over the years, has been the smallness, the shortness of email attachments, that for whatever reason, some people still have limits of 25 megs or 10 megs or 5 megs for attachment, which has forced certain, law offices that have, 1 or 2 gig file they want to send, especially video files, couldn't send it at all. So places like Dropbox got a lot more popular, where you pretty much at some point in time can have an almost unlimited size of file that you can put in the Dropbox and have a link created, and then someone will just go to the Dropbox server and download that file. And it's kind of become now a real file management service for a lot of companies and law offices. OneDrive Professional or OneDrive for Business is, as it used to be called, is also very effective way of putting files on the cloud. Very easy, comes built into every copy of Windows 10. So it's the Windows 10 sort of points people towards it. And so for a lot of people, you know, yeah, I know Microsoft is not everybody's preference, but as a company, but as far as their reputation for managing data, they've done a pretty good job. And OneDrive has really evolved to becoming a very strong service. And I've worked with a number of different law offices that are now using OneDrive. And one thing that is really nice with OneDrive is when you have somebody log in to say, you have a universal OneDrive account for the law office to access all of the files that it's looking for, you know, for employees. When you go and you want to add a new employee to the system, just by giving them access to that OneDrive, it gets them right in, and you don't have to worry about copying a whole bunch of files, doing a whole bunch of different share access levels, or having to go from, you know, a server and then designate shares and being able to say you have access to this file, but you don't have access to this file. And having to go through that a lot of times for all sorts of new files and new accounts. So much easier to do that through OneDrive, and then you just buy a new computer when someone new comes in, or you set up a new user, point them towards that particular OneDrive, and bang, they're good to go. It takes minutes instead of days. Google Apps for Business, and also for attorneys. You have a number of different Google Drive applications, and it's also now known as the G Suite, and that you can work on documents natively on the Google server, say for Microsoft, things like Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. They call them different things, obviously. But when you work on Google Docs, for instance, or Google Spreadsheet, then it's basically like working with Excel or Word. And so a lot of smaller offices have bypassed the need for installing Word on everybody's individual systems. They just get a Google Drive account. Everybody works on that Google Drive account, the G Suite account, for their Gmail and their documents. And it just pretty much universally that. And for Android phones, it's the Google apps also, again, allow you to edit Word and Excel documents without needing the actual program. So it makes the phones and tablets and so forth a lot more powerful when you're using Google Apps and G Suite. Hosted servers, I talked about before. Almost any independent service provider can do those services. It's just a matter of comparing prices and features, like how strong a machine they'll put virtually up for you, and then the requirements of the software that you're going to use and how those two would meet. But HostGator and GoDaddy and Amazon, they all have hosted app server plans, and that's becoming very present. You're also seeing Carbonite backup services is just a straight backup. It's very inexpensive, and it's a really handy thing to have. It's very easy to use. If you are not using OneDrive, or say, Google Drive or iCloud, something along those lines, you do want a strong backup service available. Carbonite is pretty much the leader in those. And then you have remote access, things like TeamViewer and Join Me and Go to My PC and Log Me In, to allow you to be able to physically tunnel in like a VPN, virtual private network, on one machine, take it over and use the software that's on it, even if you had say, an old tablet or an old PC, you could still use top of the line software, top of the line, or say like a QuickBooks or a client management system, all from say just that tunnel that you get through different remote access software. And then finally, there's email servers that you can use, such as Barracuda or Dialogue or ZixCorp or RPost, will have you send your email into their system. They will encrypt it, then send it out to your endpoint. Have the endpoint folks then go in, log in to their server to be able to retrieve that email. It's been encrypted and unencrypted once they've reached their server. So in other words, you know that they're not actually downloading it from their computer first before they actually go into service where the email is being held, and will not release that encryption until they make that true handshake from the other end. So it's end-to-end encryption that allows you to be able to secure your information, make sure that it reaches the point that it was intended to securely. Then there's a number of legal specific cloud computing services. So far, the leader is known as Clio, but it's only being used by 11.4%. And the Net Documents is next with 8%, my case with 6%. Then really the other category has 17%, but we're still seeing those numbers only add up to, under 50%. And so it's a lot of attorneys are really, not incorporating the what they could be incorporating with cloud services that are available. We just, as we've seen before, I think there's a generalized knowledge that they need to be using cloud computing better, but they are just not, and for whatever reason, they are avoiding getting involved with the cloud. And as I said, as things are progressing right now in 2020, I feel that the attorneys that have chosen not to use the cloud are definitely having to work from behind and are at a competitive disadvantage. I'm wondering how soon those numbers will go up, especially when we see a result of what 2020 has done to the legal industry, and we have a chance to really look at the end results, what the quarantine has done for the business. So some conclusions is that you want to get a good vendor. You want to think about client focus. I mean, it's kind of interesting that is such a small part of why attorneys would want to improve what they're doing technologically. They're looking more towards, saving firm costs and being able to be convenient for them. But what about how working with these sort of things deliver a superior quality products to the client, less hours invested by you in having to trace down documents and having to work, in this, lacking collaboration and the ability to share things, eventually slows down the ability to produce documents. That's why you have so many people using these systems outside of law offices. So they're doing it. They're not just doing it for themselves. They're doing it because they know that in the end, it benefits the clients, their client. And it's something that also can help benefit your business as well. As a law office, if you're able to turn your focus towards working more, how the things that you bring in are going to be working towards your clients. And then you really want to shore up security on every level. If you are going to go to the cloud's something that you're going to be using on a regular basis. You want to make sure that you have security both contractually with the people that work for you, and that your technological security is fully in place. It really doesn't do much good to leave one without the other. Because say you have you don't have people saying promise that we'll keep this information protected, you're not protected. And if you don't put the technological stuff in place, you won't be protected. And if you don't know how any of that stuff works, you just expect it to go automatically. You never check it. If you get results, a security alert, what do you do with it? How do you manage it? Those things all require plans, and plans before you implement them or as you implement them, not after you've had a breach or a problem. Focus on the benefits, thinking about how people can maybe start, working more at home instead of at the office, reducing their commute times, being able to access the documents on different hours for hour flexibility, being able to share items with people in different time zones and different locations quicker, and getting faster results on those documents should be something that would be encouraging to adopt cloud program. And I think that the more that you weigh out how difficult it is to manage physical server and to manage a physical location where all your data is versus what the costs are to make the cloud happen, I think you'll see that it's worth it. And then see how other attorneys that you know are using their cloud services, ones that are using G Suite and the ones that are using a OneDrive. There's a lot of them, and it's not hard to find examples. And that's usually, a place to start, is seeing how others are using it. You can always contact your local bar association. They have a lot of different technology seminars, as well as this one, the ones that we have in our collection. So get yourself up to speed on those things, and hopefully that will benefit your law office. So I wanted to thank you for attending today's talk. I can be reached at the current information that is listed here, and I really appreciate you taking the time out to listen today. Thank you very much.